Well, we're joined now by Michael Jackson fan Danny Oliver, who, like many supporters, has rejected the new allegations.
Whereas broadcaster Nick Ferrari, who has seen the documentary, says he'll now never be able to listen to Michael Jackson music again. Good morning to both of you. Nick, we'll come to you in a moment. But Danny, I want to start with you, first of all, because you are a huge Michale Jackson fan, and you met him, didn't you, when you were 14?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with him over a 10-year period, and I first met him at 14.
And so what was he like?
Well, he was extremely humble, very sweet, very funny, very, very sincere, and just had a very, very gentle, kind energy about him. I spent a lot of time at Neverland. He invited me to Neverland.
How old were you when you went to Neverland?
19.
19.
And, yeah, you know, when you hear these ridiculous claims that Neverland was supposed to be some kind of place to lure people in, it's just outrageous. I've seen it for myself. And, you know, the second time I went, you know, I actually, I really broke down and cried because I saw all the beautiful things he was doing for, you know, underprivileged people, children, folks of all ages. And it just really broke my heart that, you know, we live in a world where someone who has nothing but kindness and goodwill to offer can be so deliberately misinterpreted and made out to be a monster. And I thought, you know what, this will never get exposed to the world.
Can you understand why people might see it as a strange thing to do as a grown man, to invite sort of younger children to come over and stay?
Well, he didn't invite anyone ever into his bedroom. He never made invitations to people to stay in his...
That's contrary to what's said in the documentary.
It's not contrary to what Michael Jackson's claimed. And the documentary is one-sided, it's emotionally manipulative. 4 hours of emotional manipulation is a sure way to engrave these graphic, horrifying claims into people's minds in such a way. Yeah, he was never convicted of anything. And it's emotionally manipulative because they've got no evidence to offer. In fact, the only evidence that does exist is that which not only proves Michael Jackson completely innocent, but actually shows that the folks that are making these claims are actually lying. And they've contradicted their stories time and time and time again.
Did you ever see anything at all in your mind that, looking back now as an adult, would be deemed inappropriate?
Absolutely not. And I sit here not as a Michael Jackson fan because, oh, he's the king of pop and I love his moonwalk. I sit here as someone who has done extensive research into, and I emphasise these words, facts, factual information that presents the truth in defence of Michael Jackson's innocence. And I defend Michael Jackson the same way I defend someone victim to prejudice. It's not right and it's not fair, it's unjust.
Don't you think that, though, if James Safechuck and Wade Robson have got claims as little boys of sexual abuse...
And amazing how over the course of 20 years they maintained the same story, yet in 5 years they've made 4 different versions.
But we know that victims of abuse, you know, you don't know the reasons for them going one story 1 minute, you don't know what's going on within their own heads. Like, you can understand that they may react like that. Nick, let's come to you first, because you've seen the documentary and you feel very differently to Danny.
I do, yes. And what you can't... And I briefly interviewed Michael Jackson as well, so I had the opportunity to meet him. What you can't move away from, and I'm delighted you had a pleasant time there, why would this man have paid untold millions in 2 or 3 court settlements to other families that brought serious claims? Now, that doesn't mean you're guilty. I fully accept. But that's kind of strange behaviour when other young men, when other boys come forward and cheques are written to make sure it doesn't go to court. That then gives me cause for concern. You then watch the body of work, and I hear what you say, never convicted in court. I absolutely understand that. But the 2 young men, one of whom, by the way, feels motivated because he now has a child and he doesn't want to see the same thing happen, that comes out in the documentary, they tell almost the same pattern of how, first of all, it would appear Jackson grooms the family and he almost feels like a big brother figure, and then he grooms the child, and then he takes a 7-year-old boy into his bedroom to read poetry and share stories together.
Regarding the 93 allegations, there was no payoff. There was a payment settlement, which was purely to put the civil case on pause so Michael Jackson could prove himself in a criminal trial. There was nothing that ever stopped them from proceeding with a criminal trial. They took the money and they ran. The state of California specifically changed law with the only intention of trying to make it easier to convict Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson had 2 lawyers.
Why not fight his innocence?
The state of California... He was trying to... They ran. It was their choice to run. He made this...
No, why did Jackson not fight his innocence at the time?
Because they wanted to go in a civil trial. He said,
but it happened not once.
Put the case on hold, put the civil case on hold, let's do a criminal trial.
But my dear chap, it happened not once. It happened on a Does that not speak to a pattern of behaviour?
Let me say, anyone who's watching, if you want to know factual information, simply go to mjinnocent.com because there are court transcripts and documents, there is proof, there is evidence, something that this hit piece provides nothing of.
Dan Reed, the director, believes that there are at least a dozen more victims out there.
Let me tell you, this whole thing is an open gateway for anyone and their dog to come forward. I could sit here now and tell you guys fabricated claims, and because of the Me Too movement now, which these guys are hijacking and are deliberately taking advantage of and preying on the emotional vulnerabilities of real victims, knowing full well the sensitivity and climate of today, I could tell you stuff that's not true.
OK.
But I'm not.
It is absolutely crucial that these two young men, as they were, middle-aged men now, are able to confront it. And I have to say to you, and I appreciate that you have a real fascination and adoration for Michael Jackson, and I get that, but these people are skillful. They effectively hide in plain sight, and that's what this man is doing. And it is desperately important that other children, whether boys or girls, do not fall prey in the same way. Actually, this is a cathartic moment. You could almost see it as in a sense, a positive moment in that we're talking about it.
Would you listen? We said in the introduction you wouldn't listen to his music?
I can't listen to it the same way.
That's a shame. You need to present yourself with the facts. If you took an hour or two to look at contradictory stories, hiding evidence,
so we take it that you will...
Their case was thrown out.
You will continue to listen to his music?
Let me tell you now, if I had one iota, one shred of doubt, I would not... I have children of my own. I would not be sitting here defending a man I thought was guilty. This is an injustice. This is an outrage. This is an insult to legitimate victims.
Right, well, despite some calling for a ban on Michael Jackson's music, former Radio 1 DJ Mike Reid says he will continue to play his songs. He joins us now from his radio studio at United DJs. Mike, was there any moment when you, either as a DJ or as a team, thought, actually, we have to have a meeting about this, what do we think?
Well, no, we talked to the listeners about it and asked them because it's an ongoing situation. Record company, catalogue, publishers, all these people that have nothing to do with Michael personally. So it affects them. So we asked the listeners about it and they said whatever he's done and he hasn't been charged with anything or convicted of anything, that we still love the music. He sold billions of records and our listeners actually love him and like hearing his music. And I said, would you turn off if you heard the music? And they all said, well, no, we wouldn't. He might have done something bad, but then again, there are a lot of people, as we all know, in music, in film, in literature, who haven't, been particularly clean down the years. Their books are still there, the films are still there. So most of our listeners said, no, we would still like to hear Michael Jackson songs unless something really, really bad comes out, then maybe we wouldn't.
And, Mike, there are other examples of artists that are still played on the radio that do have convictions. So this wouldn't be the first time this might have happened.
No, there are certainly people that have done dastardly deeds throughout history, musical history and otherwise, who are, languishing behind bars, whose music is still played. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but it's quite interesting that some people still seem to be icons, still seem to be legends, despite the fact that they've committed quite heinous crimes. And they're still played. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, because I don't think it's fair to sit in judgment, because we are not a court of law and we don't know the ins and outs of it. But their music is played and everyone treats them as icons and legends, and yet other people are absolute pariahs and their music doesn't get played.
All right, Mike, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
The Sunday Times reported that Radio 2 had dropped his music from the playlist. Radio 2 have said, we don't ban songs or artists. Michael Jackson, like other artists, could be played on BBC Radio. We consider each piece of music on its merits, and decisions on what we play on different networks are always made with relevant audiences and context in mind. Just finally, is this just trial by media?
No, there's too much of a body of work there. The documentary makers have experience. He's doing documentaries about conflict, terrorism. He interviewed each of those two men for 3 days and their mothers. I honestly think they would have... If this was a complete charade, someone would have cracked along the way.
Not when they've been rehearsing it for 5 years. Let me tell you now, there's been a 10-year FBI investigation into Michael Jackson. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents and evidence presenting the fact that he did nothing untoward, nothing.
The Jackson estate say the makers of Leaving Neverland breached their agreement not to disparage Michael Jackson by producing unvetted propaganda to exploit an innocent man no longer here to defend himself. They chose to fund a film where the two subjects had testified under oath that Mr. Jackson did nothing inappropriate to either of them. Nearly 4 years after Michael died, they changed their recollections, sued the estate of Michael Jackson and had all of their lawsuits dismissed. had they made an objective film, it would have allowed viewers to make up their own mind. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you.
And Leaving Neverland is on Channel 4 on Wednesday, tomorrow, and also Thursday at 9 o'clock. Thank you both.